excited that you're all here. The law school is certainly always excited to have guests come over and find us over here in our little hamlet over here. Before I go much further, just a couple of announcements, and then I'm going to introduce my students who are going to give you a talk here this morning. We do have coffee and water right back there by the students. Don't hesitate to get up and go get it. I would rather you do it now than while my students are doing their talk. Although, if you do it during their talk, that's good. You know, distractions to make sure that see if they can stay on target. But please don't hesitate to if you need. The restrooms are just right around the corner on the back hallway here, or the main hallway. And like Deb mentioned, please do sign your car into that sheet at some point during this experience. If you do get a ticket, come find me or our legal assistant, Kristen, who, if you haven't met yet, will hopefully be down in the clinic when we're all done. We can do a little tour. So I guess briefly about me, my experience is I'm an attorney, and I've practiced for roughly 7 years at a couple of different firms doing corporate transactional mergers and acquisitions work mostly. What does that mean exactly? What it means to me is I didn't stand up in court. I'm not a stand-up lawyer, but I think of myself as a sit-down lawyer. So planning ahead, thinking about how to help people do things they want to do in a way that is legally viable, that is open-eyed in terms of seeing problems and issues down the road. And that's really the thing about the practice that I come in. There's a couple seats actually.
Take this.
Planning ahead and helping people achieve the goals that they want to achieve, whether that be a business, starting a new business, selling an existing business, closing a business, growing a business, hiring an employee, whatever those things are. These are things that people can do without lawyers, but there is a risk factor that really should incent most people to involve a lawyer in the process. And so I was practicing in a firm here in Lincoln only for about 6 months when I learned that the law school was looking to create this sort of clinic. And it was one of those things that was impossible to not consider, even though I was really having a good experience in my firm and was kind of looking to build a practice here in Lincoln. I practiced in Washington, D.C. for about 6 years prior to that. And I'm a University of Nebraska undergraduate alum, and so this place has a very strong kind of place in my heart as far as a place that matters to me, a place where people served as mentors that set me on a course to get me to where I am today. And but for those experiences, this would not be where I am. So it was impossible not to take advantage of this opportunity to get back. So I've been in the position now for about a year and a quarter, year and a third at this point. I spent about 9 months developing the program, and we're in month 7 or so of being operable as a clinic. Hopefully providing fantastic legal services that you won't find in any private firm. More than likely we're just living on a shoestring and hopefully not committing malpractice. But at the end of the day, the point of the clinic is to serve people who are trying to start businesses, whether they've had a new idea in their garage last night, or whether they've been selling a product for 2 or 3 years and they're like, what is this corporation that people keep talking about? Do I need one? Helping that group of people with legal services. The flip side of the coin is my goal is to help educate the students here at the law school by giving them the frontline experience of doing this sort of client work. Even for students who work in firms while they're a law student, and I don't know if anybody here is contemplating law school. It's very different from the med school model. Med school, you have a couple, 2-3 years of classroom learning, which sounds like is very hard and not fun. But then after that, you have these many, many years of residency and practical experience where you're in the hospital, you're working with patients under someone's supervision. With law, you take 3 years of classes, you take an exam, and you are licensed. And you can practice anything you want, which if you apply that to the med school model, you'll realize, to doctors, if you apply that model to doctors, you realize how freaky that is. I could help you in a capital murder case today, and I know nothing about the law that would apply to a capital murder case, but I'm actually licensed to do that. So one of the ways that people like me, especially folks who have come from practice, we really focus on trying to give students a chance to do real work with real clients, not simulations, not problems, not exams, but put folks with clients. And that's what we do, and that's the approach I take. A couple of my students here are going to give you a presentation kind of about a legal topic that would matter to any of you that do decide to start a business or join a young business as an employee, potentially leave an established company to go work for a startup. There are a number of things that this is going to touch on. But hopefully, if you have, in the Q&A part, if you have questions about, kind of about their experiences in the clinic, what they want to do is when they graduate, and it's open game today. We're definitely about collaboration and hopefully engaging all of you today about both the substantive legal stuff and the practical piece about practicing law. So I think I've said enough for now. I'm going to introduce my students, Jackie Tabke and Ryan Wolf, who are both third-year law students. They're getting ready to get on the downhill slope of their professional school experience before kind of jumping into their next stage of life. And so they're going to do a presentation which they can tell you about right now. And then after this, we'll do some Q&A. I'll give you some words about the clinic more specifically. I realize I just spent 5 minutes and I told you literally nothing about the clinic. I probably told you nothing of value, actually. And we'll talk about the clinic a little bit, and then hopefully have a chance where you guys, if you want, can come down. We can show you what we're doing downstairs, give you a visual idea of what the clinic like.
Well, again, my name is Jackie Tabke, and today we are going to talk about expanding your team. The premise of this presentation is that you have a business, you're looking to add some sort of a team member to help you grow your business in the future. Here's the address of the clinic and our names. Obviously, we can give copies of this presentation to Ms. Payne if you need that. Otherwise, we have business cards in the basement if you would like that as well. So the very first thing you need to think about is when should you add a new team member? And there are several scenarios when you would want to do that. You want to think about, are you overworked? Are you alone and you cannot handle the demand that's coming into your office? Maybe you want to expand into a new industry and you can't do that because you just don't have the human bodies capable of producing that output. Sometimes you actually want to expand into a related industry. Say you're making cell phones and you want to make iPads, they're related, but you can't do that. You don't have the knowledge and skill set to make that particular object. And those may be good times to consider hiring a new attorney, or not a new attorney, a new team member. When you're doing that, some things that you're not going to think about off the top of your head when you're like, I am going to hire a new employee. And you just go and you put an ad in the paper and you think that you would be done, but there are actually some very important things that you should work with and consider before you actually sign on the dotted line and hire that person. Here's a list of a couple of things. This is obviously not all-inclusive. You would need to talk to somebody and make sure that you had the proper plan in place for your business needs. We'll start off today, my portion of the presentation, we will talk about non-compete agreements, non-disclosures, non-solicitation agreements. We'll also talk about how you consider paying a team member. You want to add somebody, but how are you going to afford to do that? And there are a couple of different things that you can do to make it more affordable given your current business situation. We'll look at whether you want an independent contractor or an at-will employee, and also partners. And that's a very different animal. They're related, but it's different enough that Ryan is going to do a whole piece on that portion and give you some additional information on considerations of giving a portion of your business away. And then we will close, we'll do a little summary, and we'll talk about working with an attorney and some things that you may not think of off the top of your head that you have a right to have and that you may want to talk to your attorney about prior to signing an engagement letter. Non-compete agreements are restrictive covenants which force an employee to work for you for a time period, and I say that meaning that they can't go work for a competitor. So today they work for you, they're going to quit. You want to ensure that that person does not take their knowledge and skills that they've learned while they're working with you and take it to a competitor and use those skills against you. So it's a really good document to have in place to ensure that your interests are covered. There are some, you have to be careful with it because it's state law governed, so there's a wide variance in coverage, in how the law bodies interpret these agreements. and whether or not they're enforceable. The three things that you really need to look at is how have you limited that team member in geographic scope? Are you saying that that person cannot work in technology in just the Midwest? Or are you prohibiting that person from practicing in the entire United States? You also need to look at the duration of that agreement. Is this for a lifetime? Is this for 6 months? You need to try to balance your interest in keeping those skills and knowledge just to your business and that person's ability to go out into the market and be a viable employee to somebody else, to be able to start their own business. A non-compete actually inhibits entrepreneurship because it stops an employee from starting a new venture. And so because it's so restrictive, some states, especially like California, they're afraid to enforce that as highly just because they want that innovation, and this is definitely a deterrence to innovation. So to avoid this being thrown out in court, what you want to think about is limit it to your area. Look at your industry. Your industry is really important, and it's going to depend on what industry you have, how restrictive this can be. So do you want this just to be Nebraska? Do you want it to be the Midwest? Is that acceptable? How long is a good time? There is no magic number, but a lot of times you see 2 years, depending on what you are doing. That could be a long time. 2 years to keep somebody out of their job. You think about that. That's somebody's family. That's how they feed themselves. So you have to consider that as well. And also you need to look at what activities are you precluding them from doing. Are they allowed to practice in IT, but they're not allowed to make this certain widget? If you have it more detailed and defined into what they're actually prohibited from doing, you're more likely to keep that agreement in force. Also, something that you need to think about is if you think it's important in your industry to have a non-compete agreement, your competitors probably did as well. So go ahead, ask that team member before you bring them on, did you sign a non-compete agreement with anybody? What are the terms of that agreement? And make sure that you are not violating those covenants, because you can put yourself into liability, the employee can be put into liability, and it's a hassle that it's better avoided if you can take care of that on the front end. The sister of non-compete agreements is non-disclosure agreements, and this keeps all of your trade secrets and your confidential information confidential. A lot of times, especially with higher level employees, they're going to have access to information that you may not want anyone else to have. And so it's very important to have them sign both the non-compete and the non-disclosure agreement to make sure that your interests are fully covered. This is something that you can cover anything that is not publicly known or typically known out in the world, but also you have to limit it. It depends on what state you're in, how enforceable it is. Everything is very fluid, and everything is reasonable depending on the circumstances. So you have to try to balance your intellectual property rights with the rights of that person to leave and what knowledge that person has that is just inherently theirs. And it's a very difficult balance. They're not easy agreements to make, to enforce, but they're very important that you think of. Talking about enforceability, what do you need to show to make this enforceable? You have to show that you have something, a trade secret, the Coca-Cola formula, KFC, or confidential information, even your financial statistics. That could be something that you don't want everybody to know, or your secret production line. You've invented a brand new way to make the wheel. You don't want anybody else to know that. If you have that, you need to show that the employee acquired that information either inappropriately, maybe he stole your computer's data mined it before he left, or also he's in a confidential relationship, say with one of your clients or with your financial officer. He has some sort of relationship that gave him access to that information. Once you have that, you need to prove that there was actually use or threatened use, unauthorized use of that information. And if you have all three of those, you're more likely to get this enforced in court. But that being said, it's very difficult. How do you prove that you took all the steps that you needed to make sure that this information didn't get out there into the world? So it's one of those things. It's very good to have a non-disclosure agreement, but you have to be very careful with how you guard your information and how you outline it so that it is enforceable.